Hello, I'm Zoe. Welcome to Zoe Unfiltered Podcast. This podcast was started really to promote getting control of your health, wealth, and life. Having gone through my own personal journey of building a business from scratch as an entrepreneur, a mother, working from home, to losing over 150 pounds. And the purpose of this podcast really is to share successful actions, to share inspiration, to share stories, to connect people with professionals, with stories, things that could help them in their lives. And today with me, I have Seth Hurd of Brand Expand. Seth and I actually, crazy story, but we randomly met on a boat taking a day trip in Puerto Rico and found out that we actually have mutual friends. So it was very fortuitous and interesting and crazy. I truly believe that things do not happen that all things happen for a reason, and our paths definitely crossed. I'm very excited to have him on my podcast today to share his story, to give you guys insight. And so welcome, Seth. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Zoe. It was crazy. I always pay attention to these small these small occurrences that, seem to be fortuitous, like you said. And we're in Puerto Rico randomly, just started talking, and lo and behold, you know a mutual friend of mine. And we went down this, rabbit hole and realized we're in the same community of e-commerce entrepreneurs and this community for, entrepreneurs in general. And so I thought that was really amazing. And of course, I'm happy to be on the podcast. Thanks so much for having me. And excited to get started.
That's awesome. So you got your start in Amazon selling. Tell me a little bit about that. Like, how did you get into that? What motivated you to do that? What's your background? I'm super curious.
Yeah, it's funny because when I got into Amazon around 2015, and at that point, it seemed like I was late to the party. I was like, am I too late to the game? Is there still an opportunity here? And it was a great time to get in. It wasn't 2012, but it was still huge, right? You could do all these different things. I started with 1,000 units of a product that I think I spent like $2,000-$3,000. And the idea was if I can move these products within a certain period of time, like I have something, I can scale it up. And that's exactly what happened. So at the time I was working at a big bank. I was in accounting and finance. That's what I went to school for. I was studying for my CPA, looking to become like a financial advisor and sit for that exam. And I wasn't enjoying it. I really, really was dreading going into work every day and really felt like I was almost in a prison. Like every time I would go into that cubicle, I was like, it just wasn't what I wanted to be doing. So I started doing this and just kind of dabbling in it. And I read the 4-Hour Workweek. That was a huge inspiration. And really, like Timothy Ferriss in the book had this blueprint about how to do online sales with health and wellness products. And I was like, if I just apply that blueprint to Amazon, it might work. And sure enough, it did. And so that's kind of how it all started.
How long did it take you to get started when you were doing it part-time? What were the things that you ran into?
Yeah, when you start entrepreneurs know this. If you want to mitigate risk in terms of, not having an income, it's going to take a while. Like generally speaking, you don't just start a business and then it starts generating revenue that can pay yourself. You want to pay yourself as little as possible for as long as possible, because all of that additional cash flow just needs to plug into the business. And it's especially true for Amazon because it's so cash flow intensive. All of your free cash flow should be going into inventory so that you could scale as quickly as possible. So it was really difficult for a number of years. About 2 years, I was working 16 hours a day, just at my regular job, coming home, having dinner, and then working until about 1 or 2 in the morning on my Amazon business. And then once I got to a point, it was around about 50,000 in monthly revenue where I had enough profit to step away and go full time. And that was like at the time, this was back in like 2016, April 2016, it was only $50,000 a year in salary that I was paying myself. And so it's a hard balance when you're first starting off. But it's worth it. You grind really, really hard for a year or two, and then set yourself up for success.
So let me get this straight. So you invested a couple $1,000s and the rest is pretty much sweat equity and reinvestment.
Yeah.
Like, was there a point 100%. When you got borrowed money or you got an investor or you just legit grew this thing from scratch and kept feeding it for like 2 years?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. So, Warren Buffett, I think, says compound interest is like the strongest whatever in the universe, or force of the universe, something.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's kind of true. Right? If you take your profits, you reinvest them, and then take those like dividends, that compound interest. And so that was kind of the idea. I did borrow some from Amazon. They have like this, you can borrow some money against your inventory.
Yeah.
But it wasn't very much. And it actually was massively beneficial because I did it right before our peak season, which was in Q1.
Okay.
And we just doubled our inventory because I had this theory, like if we just double our inventory, and it just paid off tremendously. I was able to quadruple our the valuation of the company within a year just by doing that alone. So it had probably a 10 to 12x return on investment. But no, very, very minimal. It was really just sweat equity and just reinvesting all profits in the inventory. And that was really it.
Did you have a partner this whole time, or you were a solo show and...
Solo. Lone wolf. Yeah. And that's really challenging. Obviously these partners that have horror stories, like, they're both very, very passionate, generally like different types of personalities. Right. But I don't know what's harder. I don't know if it's harder going alone or having a partner that you might have disputes with. It's very, very hard to not have anybody. And luckily I was able to find a mentor. And we talk about at the beginning of the podcast, running into people at certain times.
Yeah.
The story with the mentor is just fascinating because I met him on such weird circumstances. I was flying back from Nepal. We did a trip out there because we invested in reforestation. We went out to see one of the sites in Kathmandu, and I was flying back. And at the time, like, I had more questions because of that trip than I had answered from the trip. And I was like, man, I really wish I had an investor, or not an investor, but somebody, that I could bounce ideas off of and a mentor. The guy sat next to me on the flight back, and it turned out to be, his name is Bill Lederer, and he built a company called art.com. I'm saying this, it's all public knowledge, art.com into, I believe it was like 300 million in the time when Jeff Bezos was launching Amazon. He also built this company. So extremely successful entrepreneur himself. And he turned out to be a lifelong mentor of mine and just a very, very good friend.
I like how you were saying you were taking some of that data from your days getting educated in finance. It's really funny that you say that, because one of the things that I had to do to kind of get my head on straight and start handling my health and my body and my weight was really taking some of those really basic principles that you learn in building wealth and finance, but then applying that to my body. And I know that sounds crazy, but essentially it's the same thing. It's just a different area, right? Like you don't get wealthy overnight. Your business doesn't necessarily expand overnight. It's like compound work, like disciplines over a consistent period of time, right? That result in those returns. And I think that's really interesting. I think we're all kind of a product of our experiences and our education. And it's interesting to see, you were really unhappy in that other direction. And it was great that you found this perfect fit for you business-wise, but you were able to take some of that knowledge, some of that experience, and really apply it in a direction to your betterment. So that's pretty awesome. I feel like that's something that people can take away, from some of the things that you were saying.
Yeah, I love that. When we're doing things like at the time, it might not make sense. And maybe you take these courses in college and like, what am I doing? Like learning about plants or whatever, biology or whatever it may be. But like what I found is, looking back, everything that I've learned, I mean, of course, not everything, but the majority of things that I learned in college were extremely beneficial to me. Like, I don't know, our current business model, it's not just brand expand, it's also what we call a sister site and a sister deal network that supports brand expand. But the complexities of our accounting model, it's like in college, we had these extra credits in accounting. And we would sit there like all weekend and nerd out and try to figure out how to balance like a cash flow reconciliation, whatever maybe. And like, I look back now and I'm like, I don't know how anybody could start this business without having very intricate knowledge of accounting. And so, to your point, you just look back and you're like, actually, yeah, that was great that I did this or great that I did that. And it's almost like, all of this just kind of shapes who we are. And whether we know it at the time, that's what we're doing right now is going to significantly impact us in the future. It's going to be beneficial to us. So yeah, it's fascinating.
So let's talk about your business. So you said you started in 2012, right? And then it took a couple years where you could go full time, right? And then how did you always know that you wanted to build it with an exit strategy, or were you kind of uncertain and that kind of came on your table at some point? How did your vision and your plan change over the years? And then tell me about that, because I know I really want to get into Brand Expand and what you're doing now. So, but I'm really curious your journey to this point, right? That made you get excited about what you're currently doing.
Yeah, I wish I started in 2012. I didn't start until 2015 is really when I started. But I graduated in 2010. I moved to Florida in 2012. And it was just, I just knew like what I was doing is not really what I wanted to be doing. But in college, like I never really thought too much about being an entrepreneur, but I always loved working for myself, because I knew that I could apply a lot of energy, a lot of time and effort into something. But if you're employed by somebody else, like that doesn't necessarily translate to what you're getting back. And I was very, very hardworking. And I did very complicated things with derivatives in investment funds and all of these things. And so I knew like I had, my output just wasn't getting the input based on my output. So that's really what changed my mind to start a business. It's like, if I'm going to give this everything I've got, then I want it to be my own business. And so in 2015, that's when the decision came. I started a company, a brand in the health and wellness space. I grew that up to a 7-figure exit in 2021. And I didn't have an exit in mind, to answer your question about that. But I believe everybody should be, quote, built to sell. There's a great book out there called Built to Sell. Because if you build it, assuming that you're going to exit eventually, you're going to build a very, very good business, plain and simple, because that's what investors want to see. They want to see everything buttoned up. They want to see SOPs, operational dashboards, all of these things that are going to make you highly successful. And so luckily we had all these kind of buttoned up and it was a smooth exit, but really it just was an opportune time, because Brand Expand came out of that exit. At the time in 2019, it started as what was called Ecom Consulting, was a business that later turned into Brand Expand. And it was really just a lot of our mutual friend is one of them in this network. I don't want to say network, but I was consulting with all of them. People would call me and ask me, various things about accounting or inventory, or whatever it may be. And I was like, I should probably just start billing these people because they're taking up a lot of time. And a lot of these sellers had the same pain points. And those pain points were very similar to my pain points, which was how do we drive external traffic to the marketplace, to our listings, and get more customers, get more sales from this external traffic. Everybody knew like PPC. Yeah, you could dial up your bids on PPC ads. You could do headline display, different types of advertisements on Amazon. But of course, the cost per click is going to always increase. And so I saw that as an opportunity. Like I knew all the agencies that were doing, what we call product launches. And I wasn't very satisfied, and actually decided to start Brand Expand because of a terrible experience. I had this terrible experience with the launch agency, and I had all these sellers that wanted this. And so I was like, okay, let's go. Let's do this.
Let's talk about that terrible experience. I want to know this because I've run into that myself. I've hired all types of people that, over my career that were professionals, but if it's not your area, it's kind of hard to know sometimes, and sometimes it's a bit trial and error. I mean, I've found that to be the case. I feel like a lot of business owners, successful entrepreneurs, have had to be burned a few times, as part of their journey. And if they have success, they're out created tenfold, right? Like it's just like, okay, that was an experience, but I would like the listeners to hear from you, like in retrospect, was there something that you could have spotted early on, or it was just one of those things? Like when you step back from that experience, like what happened there?
It was just an area that not a lot of entrepreneurs wanted to dabble in. It was like a lot of sellers that are third-party sellers on Amazon, especially like 7, 8, 9-figure sellers, really transitioned into SaaS or some sort of software, right? It's like the whole idea, like you don't want to be the miner, you want to sell the equipment type thing.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of sellers transition. Not a lot of sellers wanted to do this. There's compliancy concerns around it. It's very complicated. Taking two different business models, which is really B2B type SaaS, which is brand expand, and then a B2C type deal network, and merging those together and building them simultaneously is incredibly challenging. There's a few entrepreneurs that are doing it, and they know what I'm talking about. And so it just was an area that not a lot of people wanted to dabble. And I saw that as a huge opportunity because somebody had to do it. And I thought, if this person's doing this, if this person's doing that, like, why can't I do this, right? And I think that's like a lot of entrepreneurs or people that want to get into it are like, there's no way I could do this. There's tremendous hurdle. You got to get past all that. You got to get past all that noise and not worry about, like everybody's saying, 90% of small businesses fail, this and that. Like, if you are a subject matter expert and you feel like you can do something far better, you don't have to worry about how you're going to get there. Just get started. And you're going to figure it out along the way.
All right. What are the red flags that, our viewers and listeners, let's say they're in the Amazon business and they're looking for someone like you. What are the red flags to look out for when they're looking to hire someone that specializes in what you do?
Great question.
With your experience, you obviously had an experience, right? So
right, exactly.
In retrospect, what can you teach these guys that are listening to this?
A big red flag is really lack of automation, which comes through in high price points. I did this before when it wasn't automated. It's extremely manual, and the seller has to pay for that, right? And that's why a lot of businesses in the beginning have to charge their clients or the customers a lot more than a company like Apple that's more automated, or Google. It's because they're doing all of this manual work. So the first thing to look out for is, like, what are they charging for their service? We're able to drive down our costs very low. I think we're the lowest cost in the industry because we're highly automated. We've spent millions of dollars investing in our software, but I would say that's the first thing is look at the pricing structure, because the pricing, again, it's going to be higher the more manual it is. And then that kind of couples with the fact that if something's more automated, if a company's invested a lot more time and energy to drive down those costs, generally that means that they're going to be more of an expert in that area. So I would say look out for that. That was one of the big issues that I had. The huge cost of driving the traffic didn't justify the return on ad spend. And so that's the other component is obviously ROAS is very important in addition to ROI. And if you can't justify the ROAS, meaning, 2 to 5x or more, then it's just not worth it. It's not worth investing time and energy.
What's your ideal client? Yeah. What's your client avatar? Like, what are the people that you feel you work with the best and can have the most benefit from your product, service, or company?
Agencies are by far the best. Sellers, report to an agency. So an agency kind of is the umbrella for multiple sellers. They're going to get the most out of the software because we not only drive traffic to Amazon, but we do omni-channel. And our cost per credit decreases the more you use the software. So the biggest clients are going to be agencies because, again, they have multiple sellers under them, and then anywhere from 7 to 9 figure sellers. We have a few 9-figure sellers, quite a few 8-figure sellers. They're going to get the most benefit because, again, they can use the service more. Unfortunately, for newer sellers, the cost doesn't necessarily justify the ROAS unless the product is very unique, it's in high demand, all these things kind of have to line up. But the cost is going to be higher for any seller that's less than $500,000 a year in revenue.
So listen, I'm super curious. I have all types of clients that work in Amazon, and some very, very successful, some middle of the road, some not so successful. And it's always really interesting to me, depending on what they're trying to do. Like, let's say they're trying to attract people to buy a course from them or take mentorship or something, and they'll throw out these crazy numbers like I did 100 million a year in sales, right? It's a totally different business, let's be honest, right? Like, I'm curious from you, like, obviously there's a lot of real people, there's a lot of fake people. It can be very misleading. What's a good, like, if someone says they do 100 million a year, let's say in sales, like what percentage do you think that they take home if they're successful? Because I bet that is so different person to person, right? Because we're talking about different products and different costs and whatever, but I want to know the scoop. I want the tea on this, like honestly, without naming any names. Because, you know, and I'm really supportive. Listen, I love the hustle. I think it's completely fine to grab attention. It's good, you know. But, you know, sometimes I have a little issue with the misleading, let's say, because it creates a different false picture. I want to know, like, what's good profit margins here when we're talking Amazon. Let's be honest.
I'm looking around here. Let me grab this. One of the biggest traps that I fell in as a seller was focusing on focusing on revenue. Because you have all these sellers that are like, I do 50 million, I do 100 million. And it's like, I don't care. I don't care what your top line is. That doesn't mean anything. You could be doing 100 million, but you could be going bankrupt, right? You could be $1 million in debt because, you know, you're losing money hand over fist. I switched profit. It's called Profit First.
Oh, that's a great book. That's a great book.
It's brilliant. And this is coming from in accounting, like you look at revenue, cost of sales, gross profit, expenses, and then net loss or profit. And so you're used to looking at a top-down approach. So revenue is the main driver of success. That's not true. Like you have to look at your profits. If it doesn't matter when you're making revenue, a lot of sellers they're not going to say, oh, this is how much I have in profits because
I mean, I've sat down with people, they say, you know? They say I did 2 million in sales and then I know for a fact they make 50 to 60,000 a year, right? Now as an entrepreneur, working for yourself, being your own boss, like I'm not going to turn my nose down at that. That's a big deal to be self-sustaining. And obviously the trajectory of a business like that could go crazy at some point, right? But yeah, I was just really curious what your experience is with that. Like what is considered good profit margins in this business?
The real indicator of success is what you exited for and what was that multiple at the time of exit compared to the industry. That's it. All right. A lot of sellers are like, listen, I don't care who you are. Like your end goal is exit. Like, let's face it. What are we doing? Like we're hustling just to hand this to our children. No, we're trying to hustle. We're trying to scale it up, make a couple million, invest it into something else, do something more impactful, right? So it's really about were you able to exit for one? And then what was that multiple? Because your multiple is your EBITDA, right? Your discretionary earnings. Right. And if you have discretionary earnings and you're getting, we don't have that because it's not 2021, but 4 to 6x, it used to be 4 to 6x multiple. Then that tells me that, hey, you had a profitable, well-run business. But if you're not able to exit, I'd be questioning why. Like, why can't you exit? Okay,
so what's next for you? Like, what's your big plan? What's your picture? What do you want to create moving forward?
It's not just brand expand. There's another component to it. And both brand expand and this B2C deal site, I don't want to name the names because we're at pre-launch stage. We're literally just soft launching this week.
I feel like you're really enjoying what you're doing now. I feel like you're really enjoying it.
I do. It's super hard. Like, I'm not going to lie, especially Q1's really challenging. Everybody knows if you're not in health and wellness products, like Q1's just brutal because, the party's over. So Christmas is over. You're dealing with returns.
Dry Januaries.
Everyone's
hitting the gym before they give up by February.
Yeah, exactly. So it was great when we were in health and wellness products because everybody's like, New Year's resolutions. But in most e-commerce businesses, it's brutal. But I mean, I absolutely just love what we're doing. Providing value to not only sellers on the B2B side with brand expand, but also on the B2C side and growing these businesses simultaneously. And honestly, like our big, hairy, audacious goal for both businesses is building them to 100 million plus. Like we know we have the demographic, our target audience is big enough for both businesses. Like if we do this right and we're very calculated and we have the right people in the right seats, like this is going to go to the moon. And so it's super exciting. It's super fascinating. It's super challenging because I've always bootstrapped businesses and it's kind of counterproductive to scaling, right? If you don't have, some VC coming and throwing $50 million at you to hire a bunch of people, it's like, how can you scale quickly? So that's the biggest challenge. But at the same time, like I want to keep equity for my team. I want to keep it, for other reasons. I don't just hand it to some VC and then have them dictate the direction of the company, which is probably not in the direction that, the team and I want to move in. And so it's a lot of fun. It's definitely challenging in these environments, especially bootstrapping, but we're going to continue grinding.
What do you like about your job versus dislike about it?
The best part is seeing, we just got off a stand-up with the team, and seeing everybody so passionate and how much they love what they're doing every single day. Because you don't see that generally in the corporate world.
No, that's not common at all.
Everybody just, this community of individuals just building something bigger than themselves, and all of their thoughts and ideas rolling into a product. That's the main driver, is seeing that, and just helping individuals like live out their passion. Right?
We're basically in the same business, just different area. All right. So before we end off, I super appreciate your time. This has been I feel like a good podcast should be a really great conversation where you're both like fired up, and it was super awesome, regardless of the viewers, who cares what they think, but that we're having a great time here.
Sure.
I'm kidding. I do care what the viewers think, but whatever. So what's next for you? Like the way I want to end this is I actually want to know you, Seth, what drives you? Like, what do you care about personally? Like, it's all great, 7-figure exit, make a ton of money. You have by the way, if anyone hasn't seen, he has a stunning Colombian wife who actually, if you talk to her also, she has so much substance. Like, she doesn't look like someone who just looks pretty. She's like legit a great person. I had a chance to talk to her, and I was like, wow, she's so real. She's so great. It's super nice these days. You never know what you're going to get. Honestly, I'm sure you know that.
She was the director of marketing.
Okay, good. You chose her.
Hey, wait a minute.
You chose her,
You're beautiful, but yeah.
Yeah,
no,
what else is there? Yeah. So what drives you though? Like, what's your game? Because at some point you make 7 figures, you make a ton of money. What do you want your efforts to go to, your energy? What drives you? What are you passionate about?
I love that you say that, because you like money, and I get pushed back for this because people are like, oh no, like money is a great driver. And it is to a certain point, but Simon Sinek says it perfectly in his book, Start With Why. Like, you have to have a deep, compelling why to what you're doing, or you're not going to wake up and show. It doesn't matter if your business is doing, 100 million plus. Like, you don't think Elon Musk is coming into work every day because he wants to be a billionaire? No, he has a compelling why. He wants to be an interplanetary species and do all these crazy things in space.
Well, I would say at a specific level of income, right? Like, there's broke, right? And there's a money motivation above your bills. But once you're really set, you can pay everything. You got well above what you need. You can take your vacations. You can buy beautiful things for your family and your wife and take care of them. What's the game after that?
It's like it's like the hierarchy of needs, right?
Yeah.
When you satisfy everything else and you get to self-actualization, like, that's when you can you have to have a compelling why at that point, at that pinnacle.
Right.
And for me, like, it's always come back to just providing value to others. Mm-hmm. Honestly, like, and that might sound like cheesy or whatever, but at the end of the day, like, if money is not a motivating factor, then what is it? And for me, I want to provide as much value to as many people as possible at the end of the day. And that's really what drives both businesses and e-com in general, is how can we provide the most value to the most individuals? And that's my compelling why.
I love that. Is there any particular charity or let's say nonprofit that you're passionate about that you like to support? You had mentioned something like traveling, world travel and stuff like that. So I just wanted you to kind of end off on that note. I think it's really important that when you come, I want people to really feel like they know you and they've connected with you, even if it's only for 30 to 60 minutes, and they really get, this is Seth Hurd, So is there any other, anything you wanted to say on that before we end off here?
I'm super passionate about reforestation. Like, as a kid, I love nature. I love just being out in nature. It's just almost like therapeutic. And so we contributed 10% of profits to an organization called Eden Reforestation Efforts. And it was a big reason. And what's interesting is, like, 10% of profits is kind of a big deal for a lot of businesses, but you'd think it'd be counterproductive to, raising revenue growth, but our company took off after we started that because of that compelling why. So I love anything with reforestation, really any type of charity. I mean, giving back is it's incredibly important. And you see these from like Carnegie's and all the big entrepreneurs at the end of their life, they end up giving it all back anyways, because that's really what it's all about. You know, we talk about providing value. I think everybody should be focused on some philanthropist, whatever efforts, I can't say it, but you know what I mean?
Philanthropic.
Some philanthropy. Philanthropic, thank you.
Yeah, it's definitely a tongue twister, right?
Yeah. And it'll pay off tenfold. And that doesn't necessarily have to be your driving motivator. But it's super important, I think. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on my podcast. Seth Hurd with Brand Expand. You heard it directly from him. I am very much looking forward to our next time we get together. We should grab some lunch, go over everything. But yeah, I would love to, I'm very excited to see what you do over the next couple of years with this business. And thank you so much for being on my podcast today.
Thank you, Zoe. You know, talk about providing value. Amazing host. You're doing amazing things. Congrats on all your success and providing value to all of your followers. So thank you so much.
Thank you.